This is Harsh Rules. I'm Ben Harsh, and today we're going to learn to play Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 3. Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 3 was designed by Ken Dunn and released in 2005 by Multi-Man Publishing. This game supports 2 players, and each scenario takes about 2 hours to play. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to recognize the Harsh Rules Patreon supporters that help make content like this possible. If you'd like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/harshrules to learn more. And once again, thank you for your support. Welcome back to the Harsh Rules breakdown for Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 3. In this episode, we're going to look at options that infantry units have to combat AFVs, specifically without the help of support weapons. When infantry units conduct combat on an AFV, it's important to note the status of its turret. Without an appropriate support weapon, an AFV that is buttoned up is invulnerable to an infantry MMC or SMC's inherent firepower for ranged attacks. However, if an AFV's crew is exposed, infantry may conduct a fire attack on them. When conducting a fire attack on an exposed crew, locate that nation's crew counter for their morale stats. Resolve this fire attack on the infantry fire table with a +2 DRM for the crew exposed. The crew receives this DRM for the partial protection from the AFV. However, please note that an AFV crew that fails a morale check is stunned. The AFV then automatically buttons up and stops. Also, with an original 12 on a morale check, the AFV crew suffers casualty reduction, which automatically recalls the AFV. Keep in mind that shocked and stunned AFVs are vulnerable in close combat. They are considered immobile and to have no manned, usable machine guns for defense. The second way an infantry unit can attack an AFV without a support weapon is by way of close combat. However, first, infantry must enter the same hex as the AFV in the advance phase. To muster up enough courage to do so, though, infantry MMC units must first conduct a dice roll for a pre-AFV advance/attack task check, otherwise known as the PAATC. This is a form of morale check to see if the unit has the courage to enter a hex with an AFV. Please note that leaders are not required to make this check and may modify the PAATC check of units they are stacked with, even if they themselves do not enter the hex with the AFV. Also, all inexperienced infantry, non-elite Italian, allied miners, or Axis miners must add a +1 to their dice roll. Now, if the dice result from this check is at or below the unit's morale, then the unit passes and is courageous enough to advance into the hex with the AFV. Please note, though, that if a unit passes their check, they must immediately enter the hex. The unit may not wait for the results of another unit's PAATC before deciding to enter. Now, if the infantry unit fails the check, they remain in their current hex and are pinned. Let's walk through each part of AFV-based close combat and learn the procedure. Part 1 of this process is the close combat situation setup. First, identify the opposing units in the same hex space. These are the units that will be involved in close combat with each other. I've set up some counters here to help illustrate how this works. On one side, we have the Americans, comprised of 2 elite 747 squads and their leader, Captain Dunn. On the other side, we have the Germans with a Panzer VI-B and an elite 548 squad. When an AFV is involved in close combat, the player must declare their attacks sequentially. What this means is the non-vehicular side makes one attack first, then the side with a vehicle makes one attack, alternating back and forth until all units on both sides have attacked once, been eliminated, or pass. When both sides have vehicles, the attacker goes first, followed by the defender. Now, to facilitate this close combat process, I recommend organizing your units into groups because there are specific rules for this. The first of these is that although multiple attacks can be made, no more than 2 infantry units may combine to make a single close combat attack versus a vehicle, and one of those units must be a single man counter. So basically, infantry units conduct close combat individually in this sequence. However, if you have a single man counter available, you may form a group with one infantry unit. The second rule regarding this is that a single close combat attack cannot be made against a vehicle and personnel in the same location, which means you must also keep vehicles and personnel separate. So let's label these counters so we understand how this works. For the Americans, we can group the 747 squad and Captain Dunn into what we're going to call Attacker A. This means that the second squad is known as Attacker B. On the German side, the Panzer 6B will now be known as Defender A and the German squad as Defender B. The Americans do not have a vehicle, so we're also going to label them the non-vehicular side, and the Germans do have a vehicle, so they become the vehicular side. Therefore, to conduct our close combat sequence, the Americans go first because they're non-vehicular. They may select Attacker A or Attacker B. Let's say they select Attacker A to go first. The American player would then declare who Attacker A is conducting close combat with on the German side. Now, if they select German Defender A and are successful in defeating it, then Defender A is removed from the sequence and does not get to conduct close combat back. This means that the German player could then only select Defender B for their side of close combat, and Defender B would then select whether they're going to go after Attacker A or Attacker B. Now, let's say Attacker A's close combat against Defender A is unsuccessful. Then the German player gets to decide which of the defenders will conduct close combat back. Let's say the German player selects Defender A. They then need to choose which of the Americans' attackers they will conduct close combat against. We'll say they're going for Attacker A, following the same process. Then it's back to the American side and they can select Attacker B. And after that, the German side selects Defender B and they choose who they're conducting close combat. Once again, continue alternating until units on both sides have attacked once, been eliminated through the process, or that unit/group passes. Remember, this is the normal sequencing when one side in close combat has a vehicle. If both sides have a vehicle, then the attacker goes first, followed by the defender. Next, let's learn what happens when there's an ambush. Part 2. Ambush Determination. An ambush attempt can be made in a hex that contains woods or a building. With vehicles, the ambushing side makes all their attacks first. For example, the ambusher resolves their attacks, removes any casualties, then the survivors battle back. As for the procedure of whether there's an ambush or not, first determine any ambush DRMs for each side. Then each side rolls one 6-sided die and applies any ambush DRMs. Compare the difference between the die results to see if one side is at least 3 less than the other. This would qualify as an ambush. Now that we've learned the different ways to sequence close combat, let's learn how to set up close combat calculations. When close combat is conducted with vehicles, infantry is assigned specific close combat values, also known as CCV, depending on the counter type. Squads have a CCV of 5, crew of 4, half squads of 3, and single man counters of 2. However, when a single man counter is grouped with one of the other types, you add 1 to their total. So a leader grouped with a squad would equal a total CCV of 6. Now, it's important to note that with infantry, the CCV is also their kill number. This is the number they will roll against to see if they can close combat kill their opponent. Close combat values can also be modified by specific situations listed at the bottom of the close combat table. For example, an assault engineer by SSR receives a +1. Inexperienced units, whether they're green or conscript, a -1. Like we said before, an extra single man counter adds a +1, and a halved firepower is -1 per application. Now, armored fighting vehicles use their specific machine gun's firepower as an odds ratio against their target's firepower or close combat value. Please note that the AFV's main armament and any bow-mounted machine guns cannot be used in close combat, and is below 15 millimeters, then it can be used. But I could not find any counters in the starter kit boxes that fit this criteria. However, coaxial machine guns are eligible. Rear machine guns are also eligible, and anti-aircraft machine guns are eligible if the crew is exposed. Eligible weapons can be fire grouped together or fired individually. To determine the kill number, take the firepower and find the odds ratio against the intended target's CCV if infantry, or firepower if another vehicle. Locate that odds ratio on the close combat table to see the associated kill number. There is an exception to this in regards to main armament. If the AFV has infantry firepower equivalency, finally, locate any die roll modifiers that may be applicable to your situation on the close combat table. These will be used against the dice roll in the next step. Finally, in Part 4, you're going to resolve close combat. Following the established sequence and pairings of combat, each side rolls 2 6-sided dice against their kill numbers and adds any modifiers. Please note that an original 2 is always success. If the dice result is below the kill number, the opponent's unit or units are eliminated. If the dice result is at the kill number, then an infantry unit receives a casualty reduction, and AFV is immobilized. And if the dice result is above the kill number, it's a failure and there's no effect. Complete this for each close combat in the sequence. Continue this until both sides' units have attacked once, been eliminated, or pass. Then review hex occupancy and manage any close combat/melee counters. Please be aware though, vehicles cannot be held in melee. They can just drive away in the next movement phase. One last quick rule before we close out this episode. There is a special form of close combat where an infantry unit may attack a vehicle moving into or through its hex known as reaction fire. Infantry can use reaction fire for defensive first fire, subsequent first fire, or final protective fire. The key features of reaction fire are as follows. First, and most importantly, reaction fire may only be used against a vehicle moving into or through the unit's hex. Multi-man counters must first pass a PAATC. Once the check is passed, reaction fire is resolved as a normal close combat attack against a vehicle. However, the moving vehicle does not get a close combat attack of its own, even if it survives the infantry's reaction fire attack. And now that we've covered reaction fire, this is a good place to stop for this episode. In the next episode of this series, we will continue with man versus machine by looking at support weapons. So, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, click the bell icon for notifications so you'll be informed when that next episode becomes available. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like and share with your friends. To be the first notified when the next episode of Harsh Rules becomes available, please hit the bell icon for notifications. And as always, this has been Harsh for Harsh Rules. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.